Right, hello. I should point out, there's a little cable on here, so if I suddenly go flying, then that's that cable. I went to a meeting recently at the European Space Agency for a game we were working on. I was all very excited. I was eating a cheese sandwich, trying to impress this person from the European Space Agency, slipped slightly on a thing. The cheese sandwich was made out of grated cheese, so it wasn't just the sandwich fell. Cheese bomb everywhere, cheese all over the floor, people treading cheese into the carpet, and it was like, yeah, we'd like to work with you. I don't normally cover your satellites in cheese, so hopefully that won't happen here. Yeah, so I'm Tomas Rawlings. I run a company called Auroch Digital based down in Bristol Games Hub. And I'm going to talk about the Steampocalypse, a kind of perennial topic of interest for the last few years. I'm going to have to shoot through stuff relatively quickly to give us time for questions at the end, but at the end of it, you've got my contact stuff there. Do feel free to message me or come and chat to me after. I'm always happy to do my best. So what do I mean by the Steampocalypse? Basically, the Steampocalypse is the fact that there is way more content now than there is time for people to play it. And that means the winners and the losers are much more clearly defined, and there are many more losers. There are more winners, but there's many, many more losers. And this quote from Jason De La Rocca, I think, really summarizes it. The barrier to entry is lower than ever, but the bar for success is higher than ever. Everything's tougher. And how does it manifest itself? So I assume everybody knows, since Steam Direct came in, we've just had a glut of games on Steam, rapid increase in the number of games, and that has created a whole bunch of problems. And it's not just the case that, it's the top one hard to stand out in the store. Everything to do with launching a game is now harder. It's harder to find people to review it. It's harder to get people to stream it. It's harder to get the players to trust you, because even if you're giving a good offering and everything we've done, we've delivered on, but there's plenty of players who've been burnt by crappy games. They've been burnt by poor offerings in early access. And so you're having to push that bit harder to say, look, trust us, we're not them. But they just see, I bought a game on Steam, it was a bad experience. How do I know I'm not going to get that with you? So everything about it is harder, and you have to go into knowing that. This is a video from there, and I will, on my Twitter feed, I'll post a link to all my talks, so you can grab this from there, because it's worth watching the whole thing. Mike Rose gave this great talk, and in it he basically says, don't go to Steam Spy, look at the stats of the best-selling games. So, we make strategy games, I look at the stats of XCOM and go, great, that's what we're going to make. He's saying, no, you've got to be really realistic, and these are the numbers he comes out with. And if you're running a studio with several people, if it's just you might think, great, wow, I'm going to make 30 grand in my first year. Well, how long did it take you to make the game? It took you 2 years to make the game, and making 30 grand in your first year is not good at all, because your first year is normally your best year. So it's not great. The average, again, what's difficult with average, and there was a big conversation on Twitter, what we mean by average, there's what we tend to think of the average as the mean, which is the total amount divided by the number in there. It's actually a tricky thing to measure, because you've also got mode and medium, and I think the average game on the average income is going to be skewed. So getting this number I think this is an accurate number. I think if you took the full mean average, it would be much higher. But then if Bill Gates walked into this room, on average, all of us would be billionaires, and that's clearly not what's happening. So what can we do? Yes, it's doom and gloom. I think this is the key thing, is you've got to prepare. So I think the first thing is, do make sure this is for you. If I've chatted to a couple of people, they're just about to borrow some money, or friends and family. They're going to take their launch into it. They've looked at, I'm doing this narrative-driven game. I've looked at how well Gone Home has done. I can do that. My game's Gone Home, but with a twist. I would say really do make sure that's for you. I don't want to stop people doing it if it's their dream, but if you think you're going to make a load of money and it's going to be easy, this is not for you. There's a joke. How do you make a small sum of money in video games? Start with a large sum. So you need to start diversifying from the get-go. You need to start looking at other things. And there's good news here. So thanks to Epic, Twitch, Cartridge, these new entrants in the store, diversifying your income is going to get easier. And that's really positive. I'm not going to overly dwell on that. There's a stores panel coming up shortly where I think we're talking to that more. But if you've got a great game and offering, start reaching out to these people. Are they going to offer you something to bring it to there? Can they going to offer you some exclusivity? There are now opportunities that there weren't there before, and I think that's one of the really positives. If nothing else, I hope that this competition will force Steam to start looking at some of the stuff they're doing, and hopefully Steam, will start to review some of their own stuff, review the kind of barrier to entry. And I've mentioned before that I think Steam should increase the cost of Steam Direct, to something like 500 or 1,000 for a new game to get rid of a lot of the shovelware. That's potentially one solution, but there's potential other ones as well. And it's also just about income sources. Again, you know, some people sell directly off their own thing. Some people are selling merchandise to do with it. Some people are selling other sorts of stuff. Don't get trapped into a thing where, if you've not watched the Fire Festival documentary on Netflix, I'd thoroughly recommend it. Great example of overselling, where they're selling stuff they know they can't possibly deliver, but they need to keep selling imaginary things in order to fund the things they've already sold, and then they run out of money funding what they've already sold, and they go, right, well, what can we sell now? You know, and they just keep moving forward. So don't get into a thing of spending all your time selling imaginary things. Kickstarter's a good place to look at what sort of things small companies have come up with that they can sell in addition to the game that players actually want and they can deliver. Another potential solution from Jake Burkett, he talks about basically making your games take less time. Don't look at this, right, well, it's going to be 5 people working for 2 years to make this great epic I've got in mind, especially if you're going to make 30 grand on release. Maybe you should bring that down, and you know, it should be a much smaller thing. The difficulty there is, as the quality bar goes up, the less you spend on the game, the more there's a chance you're going to be seen in that lower end of the shovelware, even if you're not. And I've seen plenty of games that have come out that look great, have almost no sales, but they look really nice. They don't look like shovelware at all. They look really quality products. So, but they're charging like £5. It was interesting went to a presentation of the Xbox Store people, and they said anything below $10, our audience perceives that to be a low quality game. So there's no point in putting it at $10. There's a whole separate thing on how you should price your game on Steam and other things like that. But I think that's something to be aware of, is, you know, consumers are going to react to the pricing. You know, sometimes we've got that right, sometimes we might have tweaked it a bit, but it's a key thing about where you are. And again, there's a Mike Rose thing that I go there, how you should price your game, that goes into more detail. I think price for what it's worth. Like for that, again, there's a difficult thing where you're like, well, I just need to sell the numbers. But there's a, you know, if you're selling a smaller number of games, but that fan base is hardcore and they're with you, and you make that game more suited to them, then you're going to have more chance of making it than if you drop the price of it, try and make it more mainstream, and push it to as many people as possible when you don't have the infrastructure to do that. You know, I think you have to go with what you think you're going to achieve. Then the final thing I mention here is what I call go prepper. So this is to start to prep for how things are going to be. And I think so if you are out of interest here, who here is working at a studio who are coming up for a release on Steam soonish? A few, yeah, okay. Who here is actually just working even before earlier stage from that? They're just trying to get something going. A couple as well. Okay, cool. Please do this. You need to start planning for your game not doing well. You need to have a plan. What if our game doesn't make any money? Your plan could be, well, that's it. This is my one shot. I make this game. It doesn't do it. I'm just going to go and get a job. And that's fine. You know, running a business, doing your own studio, all that kind of stuff is tough. And I think anyone who just has a stab at it, I respect. I've run and failed several businesses before this one. So I speak from experience there. So figure out, yes, your ideal thing, what you think it's going to do. Look at those sales numbers of that great game that's done that. But then, going back to that talk from Mike Rose, do the really pessimistic one. What happens if it just does shit? Does really badly? What are you going to do then? And I think the issue why I think that's really important is very few studios, even really big ones with loads of money, hit time after time after time. In fact, they almost never do. You know, again, a company making something like Clash Royale, we know they made a whole load of games that they can to get there, but then they've got the money to make a bunch of games they can. If you're running an indie, you don't have the money to can 5 or 6 games before you get there. So you have to have a plan if it makes the minimum. And what is that plan? Cognitive bias and cognitive dissonance, if you don't know what those are, so cognitive bias is our bias to seek out information that suits what we want it to be. And cognitive dissonance is our ability to hold conflicting things in our head. So there was a great article on IGN I saw, and it said the Switch becoming the new home for sort of digital adaptations of board games, and we do a lot of that type of stuff at Auroch. And I saw that article and I thought, oh, that's great, Switch, we should be doing stuff on Switch. Read the headline, confirmed my bias, then it's like, no, read the article. I thought, okay, I'd be interested if the article's got some hard data in that. No, the article was just talking about a few games that sound cool that were coming out on the Switch. It's an interesting article from a journalistic point of view, from a player point of view, from a business point of view. It doesn't tell me anything. And there was the danger then that I get sucked into that because that's what I want to hear. I'll go with that. And that's a real danger. And you know, again, from my own experience, I've fallen for stuff before because I want it to be true rather than it was true. And it's easy to find a news source to back up what you want it to be. It's much harder to challenge yourself to find something to tell you why you're wrong and then go with that. I mentioned before about diversifying your income streams. I think that's really important. And again, I mention it here because I think you should have a plan to do that. If you can diversify your income streams now, maybe doing a bit of outsourcing, a bit of work for hire, some other way of generating money as a company, then that's great if that's going to offset it. Unless that's going to lose your focus and mean you don't actually make the thing, because one of the key things above all else, and it was on the, I think, a couple of the talks earlier on this have said, it's about you still have to make a quality game. All this stuff aside, you still need to make a quality game. That's never going to be got around. But what people have thought before is if I make a quality game, then the rest will flow. That's the bit that doesn't work anymore. There are loads of quality games on Steam that nobody plays. But if you don't have a quality game, then the hit is definitely not going to happen. Data, and this is how to get around cognitive bias and cognitive dissonance. Find some data points. Set yourself experiments. So we're working on a new project at the moment, and we did something a little bit different that we've done before, is we thought we'll reach out to an audience and say, we were thinking of making a game about this. What do you think? And we set ourselves and said, well, what if we can't get 100 people to fill in our survey? Should we abandon the idea? And I think, yeah, we should. If I can't get 100 people to just answer some questions about that game, how am I going to persuade 10,000, 100,000 people to fork over 10, 20 quid for that game? So we set yourself some stuff, find some data to validate, or if you look it up in science terms, what they call the null hypothesis, to invalidate your assumptions. Do slaughter your sacred cows. It's so much better to have a little bit of loss of pride where you thought this was a great idea and it turned out not to be a great idea, than you push ahead with it and see. And again, from experience, I used to work for a studio, who I won't name, a long time ago. They had this idea for a game. What a killer idea. Is like, people like lap dancing. We should make a game about lap dancing. People play this lap dancing game. It will be amazing. It will be huge. And I think the person who ran the company was very interested in lap dancing. So, and we have a motion capture studio. We could motion capture lap dancing. And so, where's the thing? Is like, well, really? Is that so? They took it to publishers, and publishers went, well, no thanks. So there's two reasons publishers say no thanks. There's either, no, it's a terrible idea, and these people who know what they're talking about said no, or you've got something so out there, like a Minecraft or a SimCity, that it's hard for somebody to see how cool it is in the current state. The lap dancing game was definitely not another Minecraft, definitely. So I think you have to set yourself these gates that you pass through, that you will validate or invalidate your position, and then have enough of your own self-awareness to say, well, I'll take the hit on that. And again, you want to look for people when you're coming out with the marketing, people who can sort of boost what you're doing. Running low on time, so I'll shoot through this faster. So again, networking with other people, super important. Networking is key. Have a budget for marketing, and if your marketing plan is, I'll post the stuff on Facebook and Twitter, it's like, no, that is the starting point. Market like your game depends, because it does. Like, if you do not tell people about this game, no one will care. It will get swept away in the Steam releases. And I think it's important to have a strategy for both the game development and the marketing, and to constantly check back in on that, about how it's going to go. You cannot leave this stuff till the last minute. You cannot just hope it's going to work, because it invariably won't. And then I say keep moving, and by that I mean just keep moving forward, reassessing what you're doing, what you're going to. Have that sort of plan. If you're a small indie and somebody in your group is not focused on marketing, it might not be their full-time role, because I understand as a small indie you can't have somebody doing that, but have somebody do that. Do not think that that's just going to happen organically. It won't. So here's a few things that we've tried, so you can benefit from our experience. So we thought about this idea of selling games direct to events. That didn't work out. We lost some money on that. So yeah, maybe don't try that. But it might work for you, in particular with the fan base. We've also been trying to do our own marketing stuff, and we've done all these various stuff. And loads of it hasn't worked. We tried doing some Reddit groups. That didn't really work. We tried doing Twitch stuff. We read all the videos about how you do it. You do it regularly. You do it on this. You do all that. That didn't work for us. For our audience, they're just not interested in going there. We've explored using crowdfunding, and we still are, to build a community. That's worked out quite well. We do a newsletter, and we've steadily built that up, and we've focused, and we look on the data about, and again, it's not massive. We don't have huge numbers on that, but they are our core. They are our fan base. And again, once you've got that core in, you can ask them stuff about, is this a good idea? Would you mind helping us tweeting this thing? You know, you can use that. We started a podcast. That's worked really well for us. Don't go, right, podcast. Set some goals, because we, again, with all this stuff we were doing, we set some goals about where we wanted the numbers to be. We weren't getting the streaming numbers, we killed it. The podcast, we were getting the podcast numbers, we carry on with it. You have to set those goals and then do that stuff as part of it. And again, partnerships, as I mentioned before, are great for building presence. Oh, I forgot I put this slide in. Yeah. So this is the cheese sandwich moment where I realised it. So I went through, what worked out. So, for example, we've got this space theme game called Mars Horizon. We started working with the UK Space Agency. When we put the release out about that, the UK Space Agency kind of tweeted that on. We got really good coverage, like in Sky at Night magazine, a sort of coverage we could not got without them being part of that. But that took time to bring them in as a partner, to offer them what they wanted out of it, so that they got something useful out of what it is. Somebody's not just going to promote your game because they, apart from the hardcore fans, some organisation is not just going to promote your game. They have to get something out of it as well. And I'm coming down to the last sort of form. So some good news, I hope, as well. So there was, Thomas from ICO Partners was speaking earlier. They do this great Steam newsletter, which again, I'll put the link out. I thoroughly recommend signing up to it. This is, so I went through their data and pulled out the number of Steam releases per week. And what you can see is it's not going up. Everybody was predicting at the start of Steam Direct it would just go up and up and up, and it would just collapse. It hasn't. Don't get me wrong, that is not great. But what you can see is the numbers, occasionally they pop up to 200, but you're actually seeing it more likely now to be dropping off a little. I tried looking at some trend line analysis on this, and I don't think there's enough data to really bring out a full trend yet. Taking that same data then and saying, what you're getting on this is the top ones, the yellows, are games that have got more than 10 reviews. The middle one is between 10 and 1, and the bottom one is number of games with 0 reviews. And if they've got 0 reviews, you can be certain that the number of games they've sold are probably single digits. I'd be surprised if double digits. So you are seeing, 25% of games-ish, and it goes up really high sometimes, of those number of games are selling nothing, absolutely 0. I mean, when I get some time, it'd be interesting to get some data of how that higher end segments, because getting more than 10 reviews is still not enough to build a business off. But that's giving you some degree of the sense of magnitude. But I think the good news of this, and it's why it's in there, is it's relatively stable. We are not seeing the 0 reviews going up, because if you were seeing the middle, the kind of the 0 reviews, that would mean Steam players are just switching off all of it, and they're just going to an ever smaller number of games. That's relatively stable, and the number of releases, I think the fairest you can say with the trend at the moment, is also relatively stable, although that could change. So, some resources to help you with it. The ICO Partners newsletter, I'd recommend that. And when that comes in, look through the games, see what's there. Click on a few ones down the bottom, see what they're doing. I've seen some really interesting looking games, added a couple to my wish list from there. But they got 0 reviews, or 1 or 2. The 2 talks I mentioned, there's a great book here about strategy, and I think that's, the thing with strategy is, if you've watched The Apprentice, they bang on about strategy, we've got to have this, when they think strategy is, well, we're going to sell 100,000 games. That's not strategy, that's a goal. A strategy is, how do I get to selling 100,000 games? What's the tactics I take? There's this book, Super Forecasting, and that's where I got a lot of stuff about cognitive bias and cognitive dissonance. It's interesting, it turns out that people who are, they took a group of ordinary people, compared them with analysts at the CIA, who's best at predicting the future. It turns out that analysts at the CIA are average about, or in the government, are on average as good as the average person at predicting events. And that's because certain stuff in them creates biases that can blind them to what's going on. If you've got a relatively good grasp of maths and you're prepared to understand and accept your own biases and limitations, you can be a super forecaster and get much better at predicting what's going on. And if you've got some other suggestions of stuff you've done, do share that with me. I'll add them on this for when I tweet it out. And do we have time for questions?
Afraid not, no, sorry.
No, well, any questions, come and grab me after, but thank you very much.